support the brands that support us.
Ever since Ducati broke its own mold with the introduction of the Panigale V4 back in 2018, every evolution of that bike has been about making it easier to go faster for longer. I think if you've ever ridden the first generation Panigale V4, you'll agree it was fast as hell, but it was hard to control. The chassis was stiff, it was hard to go fast consistently. It was a nervous motorcycle that was hard to ride fast for long periods of time. Ducati has subsequently improved that bike every 2 years in that goal of making it easier to ride faster for longer. 2020 was a step up in the V4 Panigale platform. 2022 was another step up in that platform. And now for 2024, this latest iteration of the Ducati Panigale V4 ups the bar yet again with heavy influence from, well, all of its MotoGP riders. This 2024 package for the Panigale V4 is the biggest wholesale change the Panigale platform has experienced in its entire lineup, and there's a lot to go over. We're here in Vallelunga to test the bike at the same test track amongst many that Ducati themselves test the bike at. So, before we get into the riding impressions, let's get into the bike itself, and I'm gonna warn you right now, this is a long one. So, instead of me trying to point out all the differences about the new 2024 Panigale V4, this is the V4S that we're riding on this test. Here's a voiceover session to tell you all about it. All right, where else should we start but the double-sided swing arm? Ducati's flagship sport bike since the 916 has always been all about that single-sided swing arm, and now, finally, there is a double-sided swing arm. It's no secret that the double-sided swing arm has more performance advantages, but let's be real, the single-sided swing arm is just prettier and better to look at. But at a certain point, Ducati has had to realize that to go fast, that single-sided arm had to go. So this new double-sided swing arm has 37% less lateral stiffness than the single-sided swing arm before it, and that's due to just having the ability to give the rider more feedback, because at the extreme lean angles that these bikes are able to produce now with such good tire technology, we're getting 65 degrees of lean angle. At that point, the fork and the shock really aren't doing a whole lot, so it's up to the chassis to provide the rider with that feedback from both ends of the bike. With the double-sided swing arm, you're able to make the wall thickness thinner and just manipulate the design of it to much better suit the lateral stiffness Ducati were going for. And this also all stems back from MotoGP. If you'll notice, the MotoGP bikes don't run single-sided swing arms, and that's definitely by design. All of Ducati's test riders, which include some of the GP riders, have tested double-sided swing arms, and in this particular case, a single-sided swing arm. They did a back-to-back test, and they all went faster, and they all veered towards the double-sided swing arm, just because of the feedback it provides. So not only does it have more feedback because of the reduced lateral stiffness, Ducati also wanted it to be able to still put the exhausts under the engine, Eric Buell style, and be able to move the foot pegs a little bit closer, narrower than before. And then to go along with the swing arm and its reduced stiffness, you also have the front frame. So remember, with the Panigale, the engine is the main stressed member of the frame. So you have the engine, and at the front of it you have a front frame, at the back of it you have the subframe that you sit on, and then you have the swing arm. So the front frame and the swing arm are what's providing the lateral flex. And so to get more lateral flex, which is exactly what Ducati were going for with this new version of the Panigale, not only was the swing arm changed to a double-sided swing arm, but the new front frame has been revised even more, just to provide more flex. And so in that sense, this new frame on the front has 40% less lateral stiffness than before. 40%. Not to mention it's 17% lighter than the previous frame as well. So that means you're going to have more flexibility at higher lean angles. It's going to be better able to absorb bumps while the tire is on its edge. And that all translates to improved feeling for the rider at higher corner speeds or at higher lean angles. So from there, the other big change as far as hardware goes is the new front brakes. And by new front brakes, I mean this is the first model with Brembo's new monoblock high pure calipers. Now, these calipers, the main draw to them is, yes, they're lighter than before, 60 grams total between the two calipers, so 30 grams each. But the big deal here is these are better able to evacuate heat better heat exchange. There's improved internal ventilation, a 4% better heat exchange compared to the stylemas before it. And also, crucially, there's a better and a new pad retention system. Brembo and Ducati says there's a 15% less residual torque compared to the stylemas before it, which in plain English means there's less drag from the pads touching the brake discs when you're not actually pressing the brake lever. So when the pads are resting in the caliper, there's still some touching of the disc and the pads. So the new High Pure system has 15% less drag between the pads and the disc. So getting back to the swing arm, that lighter swing arm, it also plays into conjunction with the overall lighter rear end. So there's a 6-pound weight reduction in the rear end that includes the double-sided swing arm, includes the new forged rear wheel for the double-sided swing arm, and it includes the brake disc and the brake caliper. So that combined package is 6 pounds lighter than the single-sided swing arm and its associated parts from before. The electronic suspension, meanwhile, it's still the Öhlins electronic suspension with the Öhlins NPX 2530 fork and the TTX 36 shock. Not really anything new as far as that goes. They're still powered by the Öhlins Smart EC 3.0 event-based system. Not really new, but the software has been updated for better reaction times, better control over different bumps and things. And also when you're just cruising around on the streets, it can also detect that and automatically adjust for a more comfortable ride. As far as the engine goes, we're talking about the same Desmo Sedici Stradale engine with a counter-rotating V4, 4 valves per cylinder, the Desmo valve train, and it's now Euro 5 compliant, which is extremely hard to do for a flagship sport bike and still get more power. It's 1 kilo, so 2.2 pounds lighter than before. You get half a horsepower more than before, but in the US spec, it's actually rated at 209 horsepower. For the European market, it's rated at 216 horsepower, so a little bit different there. But the big difference really just comes from different cam profiles. There's a little bit more lift for the intake and exhaust valves. That's where the power difference comes from mainly. But there's also a new alternator rotor and a new oil pump from the Panigale V4, the gearbox drum from the Superleggera V4, new longer travel variable length intake horns that are 25 millimeters in the short configuration, which is 10 millimeters less than before, and 80 mil longer in the long configuration, which is 5 millimeters longer than before. And there's also an accessory race exhaust from Akrapovic that provides 228 horsepower, no matter if it's a US or European bike, so that's pretty spicy. So while those are the big talking points, let's gloss over some of the smaller but no less important bits about the bike as well. So you can see this bike clearly looks a little bit different than the previous model. The bodywork looks different. It's been more streamlined, more aero focused, and the winglets are now a little bit different shape. The nose is a little bit different shape. The side fairings are different shape. Ducati says the aero resistance, it's now 4% more slippery through the air compared to the previous model. Maybe more important than that for most of us riders is the ergonomic features of it. The seat is now a little bit longer, a little bit wider, 2 better sizes, and better give you a chance to scooch forward and backward in the seat. But maybe the best feature is the reshaped fuel tank. You'll see there's a more broad lip to the face of it. The seat tank junction is more pronounced, all to give you more surface area to latch onto either when you're braking or when you're turning the bike, so your outside leg has something to grip onto. There's even a textured surface at the point where your knee meets the gas tank. It's a better grip, help you better grip the tank when you're braking, and also for your outside leg when you're turning as well. Footrests have moved inwards by 10 millimeters to give you more ground clearance when you're at extreme lean angles. So also too, there's a more efficient radiator and oil cooler for 9% better airflow for the radiator and 19% better airflow for the oil cooler. And then to top it all off, there is the super huge 8.3 format, 6.9-inch TFT display. It's huge, it provides a ton of information. Everything you want to know that the bike can do is on that screen. It can tell you your lap times with intermediate splits. It can show you a graph with your power and torque. It has a G meter, a lean angle meter, tire pressure sensor, along with your usual information like mileage, air temperature, so on. So those are that's the meat and potatoes of the tech changes to the 2025 Panigale V4S. We can take a closer look at all these various race parts to make it go faster, be lighter, dry clutch, but this is the piece that I wanted to show you. the double-sided swing arm without anything else attached to it. You can see the castings there. Like, it's not that chunky. You would maybe in your mind think a swing arm is thick pieces of aluminum or whatever material you're thinking about. But like the overall casting of it, I mean, you've got some bracing. The wall thickness is not that much. And that's by design. We're going for flexibility, rigidity or lack thereof, and more lateral movement. Same thing with the front frame. You can see here, it's not that thick of a casting. The wall thickness is not that much, all for reduced lateral stiffness compared to the model it's replacing. The headstock has been revised. The head tube itself is now aluminum instead of steel. Again, all for getting that flex. It's quite a weapon. All right, so one of the big talking points, other than the double-sided swing arm with the new Panigale, is the electronics. I think it's fair to say Ducati is the company that's pushing the boundaries as far as electronic rider aids go. And if you're wondering what the benefit of having 8 MotoGP bikes on the grid is all about, and having some World Superbike championships underneath their belt, you're looking at it behind me. What they do on the racetrack translates directly to what happens on their production bikes, like the Panigale behind me, but then across the entire range of bikes. But the Panigale is where new tech is introduced first. And none of that is more evident in this case than the DVO, the Ducati Vehicle Observer. It's a little tricky to explain, but I'll try my best. It's a system that does more to help the IMU make the predictions and the decisions that it needs to help the rider aids. Ducati phrases it as it simulates 70 sensors, up to 70 sensors in real time and in super fast time to just be more predictive with the inputs and the chassis attitude for the bike. This is data that's been collected since about 2007 on the GP scene and even up and on the World Superbike scene. The DVO acts as a secondary brain to clarify the data that is then inputted into the ECU. If you think about it, there's no potentiometers on these bikes. That's a lot of money and a lot of technology for a production bike. But all the things you can do on a motorcycle, chassis dynamics wise, with all the sensors and all the potentiometers, all that stuff has been done on race bikes and on test bikes since like 2007 with the GP bike of Casey's Stoner. All that input, all that data has been collected and organized, and now those algorithms are resting inside of the Panigale here. And that's kind of the basis of the DVO. It can use those algorithms that have been collected from the data sets from 2007 on GP bikes, on World Superbikes, use that data set to now better and more accurately predict the chassis attitude of the bike to better help the safety aids, DTC, wheelie control, slide control, to better dictate how they operate. And so now there's a sliding scale, if you will, of how those things operate. Like TC, for example, it's not just a set thing, it's now a sliding scale based on how much gas is in the tank, how tired you are, how worn the tires are. It can even calculate those sorts of things too. So it's a sliding scale, not a fixed number anymore, to be more accurate, to be more precise with how everything works. Again, that's all calculated from data collected for the past, how many years now? 2007. You don't need all those potentiometers now on these bikes when that data has already been collected. And so this is the smartest bike in production today with such a sophisticated electronic set to help you go faster. Here is our overview of the cockpit area, different shape of the fuel tank. These bigger flares really do give a better place for your outside leg to latch onto. But getting into more of the electronics, this dash is all encompassing. There's a lot to go over. What I want to focus on though is the ECBS, the electronic braking system. It's new for this bike. In its basic forms, it's linked braking. Now that usually gets a bad rap, but you can also turn it off. In the different modes, you can set different parameters for it. Settings can change all of that, so you can go back to normal braking if you want. But the most advanced version of the eCBS comes in race mode A with the, where is it? Now it says rear ABS off here, but with race mode A, with the electronic brake set to level 1, it works to pivot the bike like you would pivot the bike with the rear brake in other settings, but especially in right-hand turns where it's hard to get your right foot on the rear brake lever. How it works is it'll automatically use the rear brake depending on how much front brake you're applying. If there's so much front brake that the back tire is off the ground, there's not going to be a lot of rear brake being applied. But if you're using the front brake enough to the rear tire is still on the ground enough to have an effect, it'll apply rear brake to help you turn. Where that gets really effective is on corner exit. Sometimes it can be hard to finish off a corner, the bike wants to run wide, and if you're especially on right turns, it's hard to put your foot on that brake lever. And so what eCBS will do in level 1 is, even if you're off, like once you get off the front brake and you're rolling back on the throttle, it can activate the rear brake to tighten up your line on the gas and put you on the trajectory that you were aiming for in the first place. It's a really cool system that doesn't feel very intrusive at all. I mean, hell, I couldn't feel it happening at all. All I could tell was suddenly in the same corner, without eCBS, I was running wide, and with eCBS, I was on the path I wanted to be in all along. The beauty of it is in how subtle it gets activated, along with the rest of the electronic package. Traction control, the data has shown that yes, it is coming on, and I cannot tell. It's so smooth and clever that way. This all plays into what I said before about Ducati just advancing technology just further and further and further, making it smoother and smoother and smoother. And this is the benefit of having so many bikes on the GP grid with the top riders in the world. It's incredible. Very first session, first time on the Panigale V4S 2025, the new hotness. So, very first time on this bike, very first laps, lots and lots of tech to think about, to observe. You can see my settings right here. For my very first session, we're going to take it super conservative and just learn, figure out where to go, and have a good time. Oh, shit, yeah. Oh, hell yeah, buddy. Well, let's see the data. Having access to a data guy is pretty rad. Now that you know everything there is to know about the new Panigale V4S in this case, what comes next? Well, you want to know what it's like to ride, right? Well, there's a reason why I'm sitting in this chair, because we finished a very fun, a very exciting day of lapping here at the Vallelunga circuit, and I'm exhausted. And it's no fault of the bike necessarily. It's just 216 horsepower is a lot to tame no matter who's making it, no matter what electronics package is on it. It's a hot day, this bike is fast, and I'd be lying if I said we weren't trying to push ourselves a little bit to see how fast we could go with all that data being collected and being shown right back at us. We were pushing a little bit harder than maybe we normally do at events like these, but that goes back to what this bike is all about. It's all about going faster, helping you go faster for longer, and in a way, safer too. And I hate to admit this, but I was at the launch of the Ducati 1098R back in 2008 when traction control for a production motorcycle was first introduced, and that was a big deal. At the time, I thought it was great. You know, it's hard to spin the back tire up and launch yourself to the moon. But 2008 and now it's 2024 and we're at this level of sophistication, and that's exactly what this is. This is obviously way more sophisticated than that 1098R ever was and ever will be, but that shows the jump in technology that we've come and that Ducati has been pushing since that time. And if you're wondering why there's 8 bikes on the GP grid right now and Superbikes going around and all this testing that they do, it's to build bikes like this. All that testing, all those GP bikes on the grid, all that data is coming back into a bike you can buy and put in your garage and go rip around a racetrack and go faster than probably you ever have before. It's so well integrated, and that has to be the central talking point of the Panigale, is the electronics package is so well integrated in helping you go faster. I'm glossing over the big picture stuff because going over every bit of nitty-gritty detail about the electronics package would make this video longer than it already is, and we don't want to do that. So let's get into the hardware because I've talked about the software already. Starting up front here, we've got the new Brembo High Pure brake calipers. The braking power on this bike consistently, this is the front straightaway beside me here. It's a fast 6-gear front straight, and there's lots of fast sections around here. Lap after lap, this thing was consistently scrubbing off speed without a hint of fade. Whenever you wanted the brakes, it was there and it was strong and it was powerful. But as we move back, there's the electronic suspension, which isn't really new, so I'll skip over that for a little bit here because if you're familiar with the Öhlins Smart Suspension, it's nothing really new to talk about in that front. But that integrates with the new chassis, front and rear. By rear, I mean the double-sided swing arm. This reduction in rigidity for the chassis is mega important on a bike like this because you got these big, giant fat tires that are capable of massive lean angles, 65 degrees of lean angle, which, you know, you'll see the GP guys doing the same old thing. When you're at that level of lean angle, the suspension isn't doing a whole lot. The fork and the shock aren't doing a whole lot. So it's relying on the chassis, the lateral flex of the chassis to provide you with that feeling from both ends of the bike. And as the bikes get faster, you want more feel. And as these tires get better and bigger and allow more lean angle, you obviously want more feel. I've always liked Ducati chassis. This one is up there amongst some of the great ones. There are some fast turns, fast flowing turns, and then there are super slow corners around here too. And both times you clearly want to know what the bike is doing underneath you. The communication that this gives back to you is worlds better. Then the ergonomics. That's a big change for this bike too, that's less talked about, but maybe it should be. The lip on the fuel tank there, on the previous bike, your legs didn't really have much of a place to lock into on the brakes, or the outside leg didn't have a good anchoring point to latch onto in the corner. That lip on the revised fuel tank may not look like a whole lot, but it makes a big difference. Under braking and in corners, you now have a solid place to anchor your legs into, especially when you're going really fast. that makes a world of difference in confidence when you're trying to go fast around the racetrack and in corners. And then this area right here on the fuel tank is textured so that it grips onto your leathers. And in fact, my leathers are showing a bit of the coloring peeling off on it because I was gripping it so hard. So it does make a difference. So I've covered the ergonomics, I've covered the chassis, the rigidity, reduction of rigidity in the double-sided swing arm that's also now lighter than the single-sided swing arm from before, the front frame, the reduced rigidity in that and how it relates to going faster on a racetrack, the DVO, the Ducati Vehicle Observation, I think is what it stands for. It all works so seamlessly into allowing the rider aids to be pretty much imperceptible as you're riding the bike. It's not cheap, but you're getting a lot for the money. This is a very sophisticated piece of kit that will help you go fast and reliably and comfortably, but it'll still make you exhausted. So go hit the gym, make sure you could ride one of these for more than a lap because it's a lot of work, but anything this fast is gonna be a lot of work. What an amazing experience. This is a fantastic racetrack on a fantastic motorcycle on fantastic tires on a fantastic day. But I know if you want to know more about this bike, I have a written review on Motorcycle.com where I'll get into more detail and kind of summarize everything I just said out loud in the written form. So if you want to go see that along with graphs, charts, pictures of the data and the things I'm saying here, check out my written review. That plus this video will give you a much fuller picture overview of what this bike is all about. So be sure to check that out. Thanks everyone for watching. It's been a blast and I feel very fortunate to be doing these things for you guys. So thanks everyone for watching. Ride safe, and as always, I'll see you later.